Have you ever wondered why, no matter how strong you try to be, pain still finds a way in? It starts early, maybe with a word that cut too deep or a silence that spoke too loud. You learned to hold it in, to smile when you wanted to scream, to be okay, even when you were breaking. You told yourself strength meant staying silent, staying in control. But somewhere along the way, the pain didn't go away, it simply went deeper. This is the story of that pain, where it begins, why it lingers, and how facing it might be the only way to truly set yourself free. Have you ever wished you could stop feeling so much, not because you don't care, but because caring has cost you more than you could handle? Maybe it started with something small, a moment, a word, a look that told you your feelings were too much. Maybe you were told to toughen up, to stop crying, to be stronger than you felt. And so you did. You swallowed the ache. You wiped the tears. You learned how to hold it all in until silence became your survival. At first it seemed harmless. It even worked. You became the one who always had it together, the calm one, the strong one, the one people leaned on. And with every compliment about your composure, your emotional armor grew heavier but more invisible. You told yourself, this is strength. You wore your stillness like a badge. You learned how to hide the shaking in your hands, the burn in your chest, the loneliness in your bones. But what you didn't realize was this: the moment you stopped allowing yourself to feel, you also stopped allowing yourself to live fully. You didn't become stronger. You just became better at pretending. And in the process, you began to believe that maybe being untouchable was the goal, that if you could become emotionally invincible, the world would never be able to break you again. But the world still found ways in. Rejection still stung. Silence still screamed. Loneliness still crept in at night, because even when no one else could see it, you could feel the slow erosion inside, like a quiet kind of dying. Carl Jung said, "We are not what happens to us. We are what we choose to become." But what happens when everything you become is built on the foundation of avoiding pain? What happens when your strength is just suppression, your independence is just isolation, your maturity is just a mask? The truth is, we don't want to be untouchable. We want to be safe. We want to be held in a world that taught us to hide. We want to be seen in a world that rewards distance. But instead of safety, we build walls. And those walls do protect us from heartbreak, from rejection, from vulnerability. But they also trap us inside. And eventually no one can reach us, not even ourselves. That's when you start to feel like a ghost in your own life. You show up, you speak, you smile, but you're not really there. You've disappeared behind the image of who you think you're supposed to be. And no matter how polished that image is, no matter how many people admire your strength, you know something's missing. Something essential, something real. Because real strength doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't run. It means you sit with the sadness instead of silencing it. It means you admit when you're scared, not to be rescued, but to be honest. Real strength means taking off the mask you've worn for so long and saying, "This is me. This is what hurts. And I'm still standing." That's not weakness. That's healing. That's power. And that's the beginning of coming home to yourself. The fantasy of being untouchable is seductive. It promises peace but delivers emptiness. Because what you truly crave isn't to stop feeling, it's to feel without falling apart. To love without losing yourself. To speak without trembling. To live without hiding. And none of that comes from walls, it comes from integration. From meeting the parts of you you've buried. From holding space for your fear, your shame, your grief, and saying, "You belong here too." Because you don't become free by closing off. You become free by opening gently, piece by piece, until there's nothing left to hide. Only then do you realize you were never meant to be untouchable. You were meant to be whole. You think the pain comes from them, don't you? From the ones who left without a word? From the silence that followed your most vulnerable moments? From the betrayal you didn't expect? From the coldness of people you gave everything to? But what if the pain didn't start there? What if what hurts most isn't what they did, but what it touched inside of you, something much older, much deeper? That's the part we're never taught to see. We grow up believing that others have the power to make or break us, that love or rejection from the outside defines who we are. And so when someone hurts us, we blame them completely. We replay their words, their actions, trying to find the cause of our collapse. But the real reason we break is not because they wounded us. It's because their words or actions hit a place that was already wounded. Something unresolved. Something we never dared to look at. Maybe it began with the way you were raised, how your emotions were dismissed, how your needs were too much, how your presence was never fully welcome. Maybe it was a single moment being overlooked, excluded, misunderstood. You may not remember the details, but your body does. Your nervous system does. And every time someone in your adult life repeats something even remotely similar, that memory buried but alive gets triggered. Carl Jung once said that what is unconscious in us will continue to rule our lives until we make it conscious. You think you're reacting to what happened today, but you're actually reliving a pattern from years ago. That's why your pain feels bigger than the moment. That's why a single comment can shatter your self-worth. Because it's not just about today, it's a continuation of every unresolved yesterday. And the problem is, we keep expecting the world to fix what it didn't break. We want apologies that never come, recognition that was never ours, love from people who were never capable of giving it. But the truth, the one that hurts before it heals, is that the world isn't responsible for healing us. It's only reflecting what needs to be healed. The moment you realize that, everything begins to shift. You stop trying to change people just to stop feeling pain. You stop thinking, if only they acted differently, I'd be okay. And instead you begin asking, why did this moment hurt me so much? What is this pain showing me about myself? Those are the questions of awakening. That's when you stop being a victim of the external and start becoming a guardian of your internal. Because the real battlefield isn't out there. It's inside the layers of beliefs you inherited, the unmet needs you buried, the stories you told yourself to survive. And here's the hardest part, no one can walk into that battlefield for you. You have to be the one who turns inward, who listens, who unravels the lie that you are unworthy, unlovable, broken. Because you're not. You've simply been living from the wounds of a younger self. And that younger self is still waiting to be seen, not shamed, held, not hidden. When you begin to meet your pain with presence, something shifts. You realize the people who hurt you were just messengers, unconscious, actors playing out a role in a drama you didn't even know you were writing. They press on the bruise, but they didn't cause it. And when you stop expecting them to heal it, you begin the work of becoming whole. That's not about forgetting the past. It's about taking responsibility for the present. Not in guilt, but in empowerment. Because when you understand that your reaction is your own doorway back to yourself, pain no longer becomes something to fear, it becomes something to learn from. And when you learn from it, you become something else entirely. Not untouchable, not immune, but aware. And awareness is what sets you free. There's a part of you that still believes if you just try hard enough, you can avoid pain. If you say the right words, become the right person, read enough self-help books, heal enough wounds, love enough people, maybe the world will finally treat you gently. That belief, though comforting, is the illusion that quietly destroys us. It teaches us that if we just do everything right, we can finally earn protection from the unpredictability of life. It tells us we're in control. And for a while we believe it. We obsess over how we show up. We overthink every message, every reaction, every decision. We try to be kinder, calmer, more perfect. Not because we want to grow, but because we're terrified of being blindsided by hurt. We think if we can master our emotions, we'll stop being vulnerable. If we can control our behavior, we'll avoid rejection. But here's the truth, no one wants to hear control is not power. It's fear in disguise. It's the part of you that was hurt when you were small and never wants to be powerless again. It's the echo of that moment when someone left, when something broke, when love turned into abandonment, and you told yourself never again. So you built systems, routines, coping mechanisms. You became hyper-aware. You anticipated pain before it came. You got so good at protecting yourself that you forgot how to live without armor. And still pain came. The friend stopped calling. The partner pulled away. The job fell through. The plan didn't go how you needed it to. And your whole world collapsed because deep down you believed your efforts should have protected you. That's the root of suffering, not just pain itself, but the belief that pain shouldn't happen if we try hard enough. Carl Jung warned us of this when he said, "What you resist persists." And we resist reality every day. Resist the truth that no matter how careful we are, people will still leave life, will still shift emotions, will still rise and fall. The more we try to control life, the more tense and fragile we become. We become afraid of being surprised, afraid of things not going according to plan, afraid that once again we'll feel powerless. But power isn't found in control, it's found in awareness, in presence, in surrender. Not the kind of surrender that means giving up, but the kind that means letting go of the fantasy that you're in charge of how others behave, how life unfolds, or what pain will show up next. When you stop trying to predict the future, you finally come home to the present, and in the present, you begin to see clearly your suffering was never about what happened. It was about what you expected. You expected your kindness to be reciprocated. You expected your love to guarantee safety. You expected your effort to shield you from disappointment. But life doesn't work that way. And when you stop expecting it to, you finally breathe. You grieve, you soften, you open. You begin to live not from fear of pain, but from trust in your ability to meet it. The moment you accept that you cannot control how others treat you, but you can choose how you respond, you become unshakable. Not because life stops being painful, but because pain stops being personal. You realize the storm was never yours to stop, it was yours to walk through. And with each step, you shed another layer of fear. You return to yourself. You begin to live not as someone trying to manage life, but as someone who can be with it, fully, honestly, bravely. That's not weakness. That's real power. And it begins the moment you stop trying to protect yourself from life and start letting yourself experience it. You've spent most of your life thinking the battle was outside of you. You thought the enemy was the one who rejected you, the partner who betrayed you, the parent who didn't see you, the friend who disappeared. You believed that if you could just keep the wrong people out, control your surroundings, and make all the right choices, you'd finally be safe from pain. But no matter how carefully you constructed your world, the pain still came. It arrived in different forms: abandonment, misunderstanding, criticism, silence, and every time it felt like a new wound. But what if those wounds weren't new at all? What if each painful moment wasn't the beginning of suffering, but a continuation of a war that's been raging inside you for years? The real battle was never out there. It was always within. It's not the world that breaks you. It's your unconscious, the unseen, unspoken, unresolved parts of you that are still quietly running the show. Carl Jung called it the unconscious, a vast realm of memories, emotions, fears, and patterns that you've hidden from, suppressed, or simply never known how to face. The unconscious isn't some abstract theory, it's real, and it's active. It lives in your triggers, your reactions, your patterns of sabotage. It shows up when you lash out and don't know why. When you shut down during conflict, when you chase the same unavailable people over and over again. It shows up in the way you stay silent even when you want to scream, or in how you smile while your heart is breaking. These are not personality traits. They are protective patterns, coping mechanisms your unconscious built to keep you safe. But what protected you back then is now destroying you slowly. You are not reacting to the present moment. You are reliving the past on loop, and you will continue to do so until you turn around and face what's hiding in the dark. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You think it's fate that you attract the same kind of partners. Fate that you're always misunderstood. Fate that you never feel enough. But it's not fate, it's familiarity. Your unconscious repeats what it knows, not what's good for you. And it will continue to recreate the same emotional storylines until you finally pause and say, wait, I've been here before. That pause is everything. That's where healing begins. Not with blaming the world, but with listening to yourself. You ask, why do I feel this way? Not as a form of judgment, but with genuine curiosity. You begin to notice your patterns, not with shame, but with compassion. You begin to understand that your deepest pain points are doorways, not dead ends. They are invitations into the parts of you that are still waiting to be seen, heard, loved. This is the real battlefield, not the argument you had yesterday, but the old story underneath it that says, I'm not worthy. Not the disappointment from someone else's actions, but the belief within you that says, this always happens to me. You don't win this war by fighting harder. You win by turning inward, by sitting with what's uncomfortable, by asking your unconscious to reveal itself to you. That's not easy. It requires silence, patience, courage. But it's the only way to stop being controlled by the things you don't understand. Because the truth is, what you don't heal will keep choosing your relationships, your career, your habits, your emotions, until you finally choose to heal it. And once you do, the patterns start to break. You stop reacting to life blindly. You begin responding with clarity. You begin feeling not just what hurts, but what's real. And in that awareness, you become free, not from pain, but from the prison of repeating it. That is how you reclaim your life, not by winning a war out there, but by finally making peace in here. Most people think strength means becoming untouchable. We've been taught that the less you feel, the stronger you are. That silence is maturity. That stillness is mastery. So we learn to harden, to hold it in, to keep going. We say things like, "I don't care anymore," or "I'm used to it." We numb the parts of ourselves that feel too tender, too reactive, too alive. But deep down, we know something's wrong. Because this kind of strength doesn't feel like peace. It feels like a slow kind of dying, a shrinking, a silencing. And the more we resist what we feel, the more we disappear into the mask. The mask that says we're okay when we're not. The mask that smiles while breaking. The mask that tells the world I've got this, while inside we're silently begging for someone to see through it. Carl Jung understood this. He didn't define strength by how much you could suppress, but by how much you could integrate. To integrate means to allow every part of yourself to exist. The light and the shadow, the calm and the rage, the clarity and the confusion. Not to act on every emotion, but to welcome it. Not to be consumed by pain, but to hold space for it. Because what you suppress doesn't disappear, it becomes the force that controls you in silence. The anger you ignore leaks out in sarcasm or coldness. The sadness you bury turns into numbness. The fear you deny becomes control. And over time, your inner world becomes a maze of landmines ready to explode at the slightest trigger. Integration is about defusing those mines. It's about sitting with what hurts without judging it. It's about learning to say, "This is part of me, and I don't have to be afraid of it." Think back, maybe the first time you cried, someone told you to stop. Maybe the first time you showed fear, someone called you weak. Maybe the first time you expressed anger, someone punished you. And so you learned, these parts of me are not welcome. You exiled them, not out of malice, but survival. You became who you needed to be in order to be accepted, loved, or simply left alone. But the cost was high. Because those exiled parts, they didn't vanish. They waited. They built resentment. They whispered truths you didn't want to hear. They showed up in your relationships, in your self-doubt, in the way you never felt whole. Integration is the moment you turn around and face them. You say, "I see you now." You listen instead of repress. You hold instead of hide. You don't become weaker. You become whole. True strength is not a wall, it's a door that opens inward, that says, "Come in." Even you fear, even you shame, even you anger, you have something to teach me. Because the goal was never perfection, the goal was presence. The ability to stand in your full humanity without running from it. That's where peace comes from, not from avoidance, but from wholeness. From no longer needing to defend or prove. From knowing that nothing within you needs to be erased, only embraced. And when you begin living this way, something shifts. You stop reacting from old wounds. You stop abandoning yourself for approval. You stop needing others to validate what you've already accepted within. And that's when you become truly untouchable, not because you feel nothing, but because you've already felt everything and made peace with it. No part of you holds power over you anymore. You've integrated, and what is integrated cannot be used against you. That is what real strength looks like, not cold, not distant, but grounded, aware, alive. You don't just survive, you come home to yourself, completely, finally, fully. You've been taught to hate pain. Since you were young, you were told that pain was something to avoid, to silence, to hide. Crying made you weak. Feeling too deeply made you dramatic. Expressing sadness made you a burden. So you learned how to escape it. You distracted yourself. You stayed busy. You smiled when you were aching. You kept moving, believing that if you just didn't stop, the pain wouldn't catch you. But pain is patient. It waits. It waits until the noise fades, until the distractions no longer work, until you're finally still enough to hear it whisper, "I'm still here." And in that moment, it hits you not like a monster, but like a messenger. Because pain isn't here to destroy you. It's here to wake you up. Carl Jung understood this. He believed that pain, suffering, and depression weren't signs of disorder, but signals, sacred messages from the soul. He once said, depression is like a woman in black. If she turns up, don't shoo her away. Invite her in, offer her a seat, and listen to what she has to say. But most of us are too afraid to listen. We think if we give our pain a voice, it will consume us, that it will never stop screaming, that if we let it in, we'll never be able to breathe again. So we resist it, we repress it, we call it weakness. And in doing so, we make it louder. Because the more you run from pain, the more it chases you. It hides in your anxiety, in your overreactions, in the way you lash out, withdraw, or sabotage what matters most. You think your pain is gone because you're functioning, but beneath the surface, it's digging tunnels, waiting for the moment when the weight becomes too much and everything collapses. The breakdown isn't failure. It's truth breaking through the lie that you're okay. And in that moment, you're not falling apart, you're falling inward, into the very place you've avoided yourself. Pain is how your soul gets your attention when nothing else has worked. It points to where you've abandoned yourself, where you've been living out of alignment, where something needs to be seen, healed, forgiven. Maybe it's grief you never let yourself feel. Maybe it's anger you swallowed to keep the peace. Maybe it's heartbreak you dressed up as indifference. Whatever it is, it's still there, waiting not to be fixed, but to be felt. Because feeling is the gateway to healing. Not endless analysis, not perfection, not pretending, just presence. Just sitting with what hurts long enough for it to speak. And when it does, it doesn't say you're broken. It says you're human. It says this matters to you. It says there's something deeper you've been ignoring. That's what pain really is, a call inward. A sacred discomfort that says something inside you is ready to transform. But transformation only comes when you stop resisting and start allowing. When you stop judging and start listening. When you stop asking, why is this happening to me, and begin asking, what is this trying to show me? The moment you do, that pain shifts. It softens. It becomes less of a threat and more of a guide. It becomes the doorway to your most honest self. The one you buried beneath roles, expectations, and old stories. The one who never stopped wanting to be free. And when you walk through that doorway, you realize pain was never your enemy. It was your initiation into presence, into power, into peace. You don't have to run anymore. You don't have to numb. You don't have to pretend. You just have to listen and trust that what hurts is only here to bring you home. No one ever tells you that transformation begins with collapse, that the moment everything falls apart may be the moment your real life begins. We're taught to avoid the fall, to prevent the breakdown, to fear the cracks in the surface. We do everything we can to hold ourselves together because we think if we fall, we'll never get back up. But some truths can only be found in the rubble. Some versions of you can only die so the real you can be born. And that death, that undoing, is not a failure. It's sacred. It's the burning away of everything that is false. Your false strength, your false self, your false sense of control. The moment it all falls apart is the moment you stop performing, stop pretending, stop hiding. And in that silence, in that emptiness, something ancient stirs. Something real. Carl Jung understood this. He didn't talk about healing as a straight line or some polished ascent into perfection. He described it as individuation, a process of becoming whole. Not better, not stronger, just whole. And for that to happen, your old identity has to break. The mask has to crack. The image you've built for love, for survival, for validation, it has to dissolve. Because that image was never really you. It was who you thought you had to be accepted. Who you became to stay safe. But safety is not freedom. And when you begin to awaken, you realize the life you built on fear cannot hold the weight of your truth. That's when it collapses. The job that once gave you meaning no longer fulfills you. The relationship that felt safe now suffocates you. The identity you spent years perfecting begins to feel hollow. And that hurts. Deeply. Because you're losing pieces of yourself. You're watching everything you've used to define your worth slip through your fingers. But what's really dying is not you. It's the illusion. The illusion that you had to be perfect to be loved. That you had to be strong to survive. that you had to be someone else to belong. When those illusions shatter, you're left with nothing but yourself. Raw, unfiltered, exposed, and that's terrifying. But it's also beautiful, because for the first time, you're meeting the version of you that was buried beneath all the layers. The one who was never loud enough, brave enough, shiny enough, but always real. That's the beginning of transformation. Not in the rise, but in the fall. Not in the light, but in the dark. Not in adding more to yourself, but in shedding everything you're not. It's a lonely path. Few people understand it. Most will tell you you're being dramatic, negative, or broken. But you're not broken. You're breaking open. You're breaking through. And on the other side of that breaking is a clarity the old you could never reach. Because the old you was built on protection. The new you is built on truth. And truth doesn't need to be liked. It doesn't need to be understood. It just needs to be lived. So let yourself fall. Let it all come undone. Let the pieces scatter. You don't need to hold it together anymore. You just need to stay present, to breathe, to trust that something deeper is unfolding beneath the chaos. You are not ending. You are emerging, becoming. Becoming someone who doesn't need to pretend. Someone who doesn't chase love or beg for peace. Someone who simply is anchored clear whole. And that version of you. That version only arrives when the old one dies. So don't resist the ruin. Walk into it. Let it strip away what's false. Let it teach you who you are without the mask. And when you rise, and you will, you'll carry a different kind of power. Not the power of performance, but the power of presence. Not the illusion of control, but the strength of surrender. And in that space, you'll understand why it had to fall apart, because your soul was never meant to live inside a cage. No one tells you that the deeper you go, the lonelier it becomes. That as you begin to peel away the layers of illusion, of identity, of inherited pain, you'll start to notice the distance growing between you and the people you once called your tribe. The ones who used to understand you, suddenly don't. The conversations that once felt alive, now feel empty. The places that once felt like home, now feel too small. This is the cost of depth. The more you awaken, the more you begin to see what others are still trying to avoid. And it's not because you're better than them, it's because you've chosen a different path, a path inward, a path most people are afraid to take. Carl Jung knew this. He understood that the journey toward individuation, toward becoming whole, is not a journey that many are willing to walk. It requires facing the unconscious, confronting the shadow, breaking the narratives you've lived by your entire life. It requires letting go of who you thought you were so that who you truly are can finally emerge. And that process, however liberating, is not something that happens in a crowd. It happens in silence. It happens in solitude. It happens in the uncomfortable space where small talk no longer satisfies and pretending no longer feels possible. You'll try to share your insights with people who aren't ready to hear them. You'll speak from the soul and be met with blank stares. You'll express vulnerability and be told to lighten up. And in those moments, you'll realize that not everyone wants to go where you're going. Not everyone is ready to sit with themselves in the dark. Not everyone wants to question what they've built their identity upon. Most people are still invested in the performance of appearing happy, of chasing validation, of avoiding discomfort at all costs. But you're done with that. You're no longer looking for comfort, you're looking for truth. And the truth at first is a lonely thing, because it strips you bare. It removes everything that used to give you belonging. And for a while, you'll grieve that loss. You'll miss the old connections, even if they were shallow. You'll miss being understood, even if it was conditional. But eventually, something else will grow in the space left behind. A quiet peace, a grounded clarity, a sense of alignment that doesn't come from being seen, but from seeing yourself. You'll find that solitude becomes sacred, not because you don't need people, but because you no longer need to be distracted from yourself. And slowly you'll begin to attract new connections. Ones built not on performance, but on presence. Not on agreement, but on authenticity. These are rare, but they're real, and they can only be found once you've had the courage to stand alone. Few will follow you into this depth, but those who do, they're your mirror, your allies, your soul's companions. And even if they're few, they're enough, because you no longer measure connection by quantity. You measure it by truth, and now finally you're surrounded by something real. Even if that something starts with just you. You were never meant to be untouchable. That idea that strength is measured by how little you feel, by how well you hide, by how quickly you get over it, was never yours to begin with. It was handed to you by a world afraid of softness, a culture that mistook stillness for wisdom, silence for strength, numbness for maturity. So you tried to fit into that mold. You learned how to tighten your voice, how to look composed even when your heart was breaking. You learned to apologize for your own humanity. You convinced yourself that if you could just be tougher, quieter, more controlled, nothing could ever hurt you again. But that wasn't strength. That was survival. And survival is not the same as living. Carl Jung didn't speak of wholeness as a place where pain no longer exists. He spoke of it as a place where nothing inside you has to be denied anymore. You were never meant to become stone. You were meant to feel, to respond, to break open and rebuild. You were meant to carry the fullness of your experience, not just the curated parts, not just the palatable moments, but all of it. The grief, the tenderness, the longing, the rage, the trembling truth of being alive. You were meant to be real, not perfect, and that's what makes you powerful. Not your ability to avoid pain, but your willingness to face it with open eyes. Not your detachment, but your depth. Not how hard you've become, but how honest you're willing to be. Because the truth is becoming untouchable never protected you. It only kept you from yourself. It cut you off from the parts of you that needed the most love. The little child who still wonders if they're enough. The teenager who never learned how to feel safe. The adult who's still trying to prove something to people who never really saw them. You've been carrying all of it, hoping one day the weight would disappear if you just worked harder. But healing doesn't come from effort. It comes from surrender, from finally laying down the armor, from looking at every part of yourself and saying you can stay, even the parts you tried to kill, even the emotions you once saw as weakness, even the shadow you tried to outrun. Because when you allow them to stay, something remarkable happens. They stop controlling you. You don't have to fight anymore. You don't have to perform. You just get to be present, whole, alive. That's where true freedom lives, not in becoming invulnerable, but in becoming undivided. Not in escaping your story, but in rewriting the way you relate to it. You were never meant to live in fragments, never meant to harden just to make it through, never meant to shut down just to be accepted. You were meant to be seen, and the first person who needs to see you is you. So if you're tired of hiding, if the armor is cracking, if the silence is too loud, it's okay. You're not falling apart. You're falling inward, into something real, something lasting, something true. And when you rise again, and you won't need to be untouchable, because nothing outside of you will be stronger than the peace within you. And that is the kind of strength no one can take away. In a world that rewards perfection, performance, and emotional suppression, one of the most radical things you can do is tell yourself the truth. The truth that pain is not weakness, it's a signal. That breaking down is not failure, it's the first step toward breaking free. We've been conditioned to wear masks to protect ourselves with armor, to measure strength by how little we feel. But real strength isn't about being untouchable. It's about being unafraid to feel, about holding your fear, your grief, your confusion with presence, not judgment. Carl Jung reminded us, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The healing begins when you stop trying to escape the pain and start listening to it. When you stop performing and start integrating. The more you understand yourself, the less the world can control you. So take the risk to go inward. Sit with what hurts. Make peace with your past. You don't need to be harder. You need to be more honest. You don't need to be invincible. You need to be whole. The life you're looking for doesn't begin with becoming someone else. It begins the moment you give yourself full permission to be exactly who you are, completely consciously and without apology.